Welcome back, guys. Today I'm going to talk from Matthew 9:9. Matthew chapter 9, when we come to verse 9, it records a very fascinating story of the call of Matthew. And I want to highlight a few principles for you from this story specifically. If we start reading Matthew 9:9, it says this: As Jesus passed on from here, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at table in house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice." So Jesus is making a very fascinating statement in chapter 13, when in verse 13 he says, "Go and learn," while responding to Pharisees and say, "Go and learn what this means is I desire mercy and not sacrifice." And when we come to Galatians chapter 6, starting from verse 1, in Paul's writing, when Paul is talking to the people, believers in in Galatia, he's highlighting the same principle, but in different words, but it's reflecting on the same principles. Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, it says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in the spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burden, and so fulfill the law of Christ." It's very, this two portions of the scriptures is very fascinating, but they're so correlated and highlights a very important and crucial principles for us. So many times we grow up with these principles revolving around our heads, or we see the different examples of these principles going around us when we see that in order to get something, in order to do something, you have to give away something. In order to gain something, in order to go from one level to another, to get something that you would desire, you have to give it something, which is true up to a certain level. But when it comes to the kingdom principle, the meaning changes. It's very different. Jesus said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So many times we grow up in this habit of giving away things to gain something. We feel like if we put ourselves down, if we feel like we start ignoring who we are, we're going to gain something in our life. Either when we're relating with people, either when we're relating with God, even we are relating in the community that we are in. We grow up in this thing that if we keep giving things away from our life, if we keep ignoring who we are, if we keep putting ourselves down, if we keep pressing ourselves down, we're going to gain something from God, or it's going to please God, or it's going to make God happy. But God never desires self-sacrifice. And I want to expound in that statement a little bit. Is saying that God would never want to take you to the place where He always wants you to take. God will always give you the things that He wants you to give, but not making you deny who you are. Discovering who you are, discovering what God has created you for, discovering your identity, discovering how God made you, discovering the things that He says you, discovering your strength, discovering your giftings, discovering what you are good at, what leads you to the place where God wants you to be. Because when God says He's going to take you someplace, when God says He's going to do something in your life, it was never against who you are. God never means self-denial. When God said, when Jesus said He desires mercy, not sacrifice, that God always put love, mercy, kindness, gentleness beyond everything else. And same principle that Paul explains in Galatians chapter 6 when he says, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. And that's the clear picture of how God wants His church, His community to look like. God's design of community is, God's idea of church, God's idea of community is that we don't ignore sin, that we don't ignore someone's mistakes, but with gentleness and kindness, we help each other to grow into the things that God has for our lives, instead of bringing judgment upon someone. And this is what Paul says, that be quick to restore someone in kindness and gentleness, and be careful that least that you not be tempted. The same thing was happening in the call of Matthew, the story of call of Matthew, that Jesus was hanging out with tax collectors and sinners, and Pharisees came, and their statement was, how come your Lord, how come Jesus can hang out with these people? And Jesus' response was, go and learn what does it mean when it says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Today, when you look at your relationship with God, God is not desiring a sacrifice from you, because He already sacrificed His Son to give you freedom and breakthrough. You don't have to keep sacrificing things that you desire in your life. We don't have to live a life of self-sacrificial, like expecting that God's going to bring breakthrough, that God's going to bring change. He has already sacrificed His Son to provide an answers for every question that you're looking for in your life. He has already provided an answer. What God expects from you is you give Him first place in every aspect of your life. And that is not self-denial. That is not sacrifice. That is saying, God, I know how good I am in singing. God, I know how good I am in my education. God, I know how good I am in these things. But I know I have this because of you. So I always want to give you first place in everything that I do. And that is not self-denial. That is not self-sacrifice. That is identifying who you are. You're identifying your strength, identifying your strength in every area of your life, and saying, I know I am good at this, but I also know I am good at this because God has given me these giftings. So whatever I do with this, I'll do it unto the glory of God. And the same principle that was transitioned in Paul's writing into community. Sometimes when we are so quick to correct someone, and we feel like we are doing good, when we are so quick to judging people and kicking out of the community, thinking we're trying to make a healthy and righteous community, but I tell you, God is not in it, because He never enjoys when we call on judgment upon someone, because that's His part. God says, Jesus says, I desire mercy. God is looking for a community. God is looking for a group of people. When they grow in accountability, understanding that how necessary it is to accomplish the God-given purpose, and they don't ignore anyone's sin or mistakes, but they don't use it as an opportunity to bring judgment on someone, but they identify it and try to correct each other with the gentleness. And this is exactly what Jesus was doing when he was hanging out with tax collectors and sinners, and he was having a meal with them at the table. And this is a very crucial principle to understand, which applies to our personal life and how we relate with God. It applies to the community that we are in, and this is where God's happiness belongs. This is what pleases God. When you start living our life, when you apply the principle of impersonally, you could say that when you start living our life in this guilt of saying, God is not happy at me because I'm doing something wrong, I need to give up something. Do it unless God tells you. Do it when God tells you. But those are exceptions, and principles are not based on exceptions. When it comes to community, that we're having this culture of grace, when we're having this culture of empowerment, when having this culture of mercy, where we give people freedom to do mistakes, because they know that when they do mistake, there is someone to carry them, and that will empower them to fulfill what God has called them to do, rather one mistake and they're out. And this is a very crucial principle that we have to understand. When Jesus says, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice.